Hi, this is Jim from Conveyor. In this video, I'm going to create a web application that connects the Twilio SMS service to ChatGPT's API, which will allow anyone with the phone number to text with ChatGPT. I'm imagining this being useful for a business where the customer doesn't want to have to go to a website or install an app. Text messaging has the benefit of being a familiar interface and low friction. This project uses Visual Studio 2022, ASP.NET 7, SemanticKernel, ChatGPT, Twilio, and Conveyor. This is the result of the project. I'm texting here with the laundromat assistant I made, but there are probably better business use cases out there. You can even write plugins for ChatGPT to enable business-specific knowledge and functions. Making it work is pretty awesome and surprisingly easy actually, especially with our free tool Conveyor to receive SMS webhook calls during development. Although I mentioned Twilio's service a lot, there isn't any special reason other than it being probably the most well known. There are other services such as MessageBird, D7 SMS, Inteltech SMS, SMS Gateway, and Telnix. I'm not endorsing any of them. Please pick the one that fits you best. I will also mention ChatGPT a lot, and things are changing rapidly in the chatbot market, so I'm sorry if the code in this video becomes outdated, and remember to consider other chatbot API providers. Okay, I'm going to set up ChatGPT as a laundromat assistant who can help with washing and drying questions. I'm going to go through every step from building up the application to connecting to ChatGPT and Twilio, so it is going to be really detailed, but please use the chapter markers to skip anything as desired. I'll create a new web app project. It needs to be .NET 6 or newer in order to use SemanticKernel. The idea for this project is to first have a simple chat web page where I can test sending messages to ChatGPT and then create an API controller that can receive messages from Twilio's SMS service. This is called a webhook and works by giving the sending web application, Twilio in this case, a URL to call when an event happens, such as a text message is received. To start, I'll make the web-based chat that sends messages to ChatGPT using the SemanticKernel package. So in Developer PowerShell, install the package by cding into the project folder. And .NET add package. And it's pre-release mode at the moment. And of course you can use the UI if you prefer. Let's have a look at the ChatGPT API in SemanticKernel. How do you send a message? Well, here's the basic structure. So to begin with, we create the kernel and then we configure it with the model that we want to use and our open API key and our organization ID. Next, we set up ChatGPT. So first of all, we give it its instructions on how to act, and then here we create the service and send the setup instructions. And then down here, we have to recreate the conversation history because ChatGPT isn't stateful. So you can see here the user asked for something, and then we had previously received a message back from ChatGPT, why not try soccer? And then we can add the next message there. And then we can send that conversation to ChatGPT and get the reply. The main takeaways are that I need to provide credentials and have the conversation resent with every request. So it will need to be persisted somehow between calls. This is also a good point regarding cost. ChatGPT pricing is based on the number of tokens sent and received. The number of tokens is similar to the number of characters, but not quite. There is a calculator on the OpenAI website, but I will just say that you can have hundreds of short messages for a few US cents. However, because ChatGPT isn't stateful and the entire conversation is resent with every message, the number of tokens increases with the length of the conversation and therefore becomes more expensive. Just something to bear in mind. There is also a usage limit page where you can set spend limits. I would recommend that in case something goes wrong, like an infinite loop, it could get expensive. Okay, back to the application. I'll create a basic data type for the messages being sent back and forth. So I think we're going to need to know who the sender is. And of course, we're going to need the message, which I'm going to default to null. And we need to define message sender. That's going to be an enum. And it can be the user or ChatGPT, which is system. There's already an index.cshtml. I'll open the model for it and add properties for a list of conversation messages and the new message that's just been entered. The list can function as a way to persist the conversation and show the user what has already been said each time the page loads. This is our new message that the user has just entered. And we want Razor to bind to these properties. In the markup side of things, I just need to have a basic form to show the past messages and allow the entry of a new message. So I'll get rid of the boilerplate. We're going to begin a form. And we want to display the conversation messages. So that property we just added. And we're going to need an editor for the new message. And a button just to send the new message back to the server. The application needs to know how to display for and also edit for the type conversation message because we just created it. Although the call is to display for the list of conversation message objects, Razor will automatically iterate the list and call display for on each conversation message. So to do that, make a display templates and edit templates folder under shared. And add a Razor page to each called conversation message. For the display template version, I just want to output the fields for the model conversation message. So I'm going to change the model to the type conversation message which I created. Don't need that. And what I need to do is add hidden fields for the sender and the message so that they are persisted and sent back to the server when the form is submitted. But I also want to show the user the previous messages as well, so I will actually output those. And I need to do the same for the message. Just add a couple of blank lines there. For the editor template, I'm going to change the model again. We want it to be the data type that we created. And we actually just need a text box for the message. Because this is the new message field, we don't actually want to allow the user to specify the sender. That field will be added by us later. All right, let's try it out. That looks about right. When the send button is clicked, the page model code is called, and it's going to use the post HTTP method. So in the page model, I'm going to change onGet to onPost, and I'm also going to make this handler asynchronous because I know that ChatGPT's API is asynchronous. And I'm just going to add the new message. Oops. I'm just going to add the new message to my list of messages. There we go. And run it. Just type in anything. We can see that it works. Basically, let's have a think how to send the new message to ChatGPT and get the response. I think I will create a class to handle the logic of sending the message. This will definitely be handy when I add the API controller later that handles the SMS message, since that will use this new class too. So I'll create a new class, and I'm going to call it chatbot session. And I can keep the conversation history in here too. So I'm actually just going to copy this and put it here. And I'm going to initialize it as well, because this copy of it isn't bound by Razor. And I'm going to change that property back here in the page model as well. What I want to do is actually just map it to the property in chatbot session. So what I need first is an instance of chatbot session. I'll do and initialize it. And then I can change this property here. I don't need the setter anymore. I'm just going to return what chatbot session has. There we go. I need to close that. And I can go back to my on post, and we're not going to do this here now. Instead, let's create a method in here, call it forward message from user async. And yes, I do want that to be asynchronous. So I'm going to await it. Let's create this, and then F12 to get to it. And we need to make this asynchronous as well. And then in here, well, I am going to want to add the message to the list. And I also do need to set the sender field. If you remember, that's not coming from the user interface. So by definition, it's going to be the user who sent that message. And I need to fix the capitalization here now. And then we want to actually send the messages to ChatGPT. So let's call that, I'm going to send the whole history. So now we actually need to generate this method. Again, we have to change this and specify that it's async. I'm just going to copy the first part from the boilerplate, but there is actually a change already made here. So if you remember, this argument was for the OpenAI key, and this one here was for the organization ID. So you can see that I'm actually going to read it from my environment variables. I'll talk about that in a moment. But for now, just assume that those environment variables are set correctly. I'm just going to change this so that it's more visible. Okay, so when you work with ChatGPT, you need to sort of give it a mission statement, I guess you could say. We need to tell it what to do. Otherwise, it will just sort of do the usual chatbot that it does that you've probably seen on the internet. So I'm going to tell it that it's a laundromat attendant who gives laundry advice in 20 words or less. So I don't want the messages to be too lengthy, so I'm going to specify 20 words or less. And I can give it more guidelines as need be. So if I find that it gives advice I don't want it to, or if I need it to have any specific advice I want it to give, I can specify that here. And just remember again that this message does count to your token count, so the longer this message is, the more it's going to cost you. Okay, and then the next part was to get the service. And then we're going to create a new chat. And I typoed there. And if you remember, we need to recreate the entire history and send all that again. So we already have, obviously, the list of messages already sent. So let's iterate those. And we're going to switch on the type of sender because we call a different method in the API depending on whether it's a message from the user or a message from the ChatGPT. So in the case that it's the user, we're going to use add user message. And of course, it's the message that we just received. That's fine. And if it's from ChatGPT before, oops, that will work. Okay, that looks right. So that just loads up the API with all of the messages, including the new one, because we already added that to the conversation. So let's get the reply now from ChatGPT. We send the chat. And we're going to add the reply. So it's a new conversation message. The sender is going to be not the user, but the system. And the message is a system reply. That was very good. And we're just going to return it in case that becomes useful. So this would be a string. So back to those two environment variables, OpenIA:key and OpenIA:orgid. These are stored in the system environment variables rather than in a config file in the spirit of keeping secrets out of source code, so they don't accidentally slip into source control or get shared, as has happened in GitHub, for example. These are the credentials you use to authenticate with OpenAI. To get the org ID, go to platform.openai.com/account/org settings, and you can see it here. And we're going to copy it. Then open the system environment variables and add a variable named OpenAI: org ID with the value from the website. And then go back to the website, and down here in API keys, I can create a new secret key. Just give it a name. And I'm going to copy that. As it tells you, it's never going to show you that again. If you did forget the key, it's okay. You can just delete it here from the list and create a new one and then update your code. So I need a new environment variable for that key, which is going to be OpenAI:key. And then I'll paste the value here. Here's the important thing to remember and save yourself some time. If you set environment variables, you have to restart Visual Studio. Maybe you just have to restart IS Express, I don't actually know, but you do that to get the new values picked up. Now run it and see if it works. So this is going to actually send a message to ChatGPT. There we go. So we have a basic web-based chat interface. It's time to bolt on the Twilio part so that the application can handle SMS calls. How does an SMS API provider like Twilio work? At present, when you sign up with them, you get some free credit. It was $15 when I did it, which you use for a phone number for your region, and any SMS you send and receive is paid for with that credit. Remember, of course, that you are using a metered service and will get stuck with a bill if you send or receive a lot of messages, or if you call your emergency number, like 911, but are not set up properly. In North America, you're charged $75 if you don't have an address in the system for the phone number. You'll see I haven't set it up in my account, and that's because they expect a US address, but I'm in Canada. Anyway, I just won't call 911 using it. from the coding side, you need a public URL, most likely a web API, that the SMS provider will call when a text message comes in to your number. I'll show you how to create the web API and expose it to the internet using Conveyor during development, so you don't have to keep publishing your code to a server, which you would have to otherwise. So first thing to do is add required packages. So I like doing it in Developer PowerShell. .NET add package Twilio, and also ASP.NET Core. You can probably get away without using these packages if you want, but they help with formatting SMS replies in this case. Next, I will add a web API controller to the project. I'm going to call it SMS receiver controller. I'm going to change it to a Twilio controller. And decorate the class as API controller. And the root I want to be API/controller. And I'll make the default method something I can test out, because I know I won't get it right first time. So there's no view, it's an API, so content, hello world. I need to add controllers to the services in program, so I'm going to go there. Services, add controllers, and I need to map controllers. And run and test in the browser. That's the main page, but we want to call that controller, so it's SMS receiver. So there we go, hello world, great. I just need to create an action method to receive the SMS calls now. And I got this method signature from, let me just go here. I got this method signature from Twilio documentation, where from will be the sender's phone number, and of course body is the text message. It's decorated HTTP post because by default Twilio sends the message as a post request. The from form attribute is because the post request coming in will have the data in form encoding. For other SMS providers, the request could be totally different. It could be JSON formatted, for example, and so this code won't work. At this point, I have everything I need to send the message on to ChatGPT like I was before, and then whatever I set in the return value, the TweML result is sent as the response text to the user. So let's write some code to actually use the chatbot session. Not quite. We want to make sure from is not null. And we're just going to create a chatbot session like that. And we're going to create a new conversation message based on the arguments that came in. So that's an empty message. We're going to fill it with the body. And the sender will be, obviously it's not from, it's actually the user. The user wrote the message on a phone and sent it to us, and now we're sending it to ChatGPT. So we can get the reply and call that method that we wrote before, forward message from user async, with that message we just created. And then we want to create an object that Twilio is expecting for the response. So we send the response back to Twilio, and then it sends it as a text message back to the user. So we just need to load it with the reply we got from ChatGPT, and then return it formatted the correct way. Okay, and what is wrong here? Cannot assign void to an implicitly typed variable. Okay, did I not specify? No. I have to specify the return type over in this method that we wrote earlier and actually return it. There we go. And this is not supposed to be message response, it's supposed to be messaging response, I think. We also need to pull in the namespace. And we better just finish this off. So if from is null, well, for now we'll just return null. Okay. Now, to test this, I can either send a post request from a program like Postman, I'm just going to run it, which allows me to create the request manually, or I can set up Twilio with this webhook and hope it works. I can't give Twilio my local host for the webhook address because to Twilio, localhost is their local machine. So that's why we're going to use the Conveyor extension to create a public URL via tunneling that we can give to Twilio. So because I need to set up Conveyor and have it tunneling, as well as setting up Twilio to point to the correct URL, and because this introduces more points of failure when I haven't even tried out my method, I'm going to send a test request from Postman first and make sure it works. Otherwise, I would be banking on Twilio being configured properly, Conveyor running properly, and my API action working properly to do anything. So I'll test it in Postman. Postman is a nice tool for testing web APIs, and here it is. So I'm going to create a new request. The URL is this one, and I'm going to set the type to post, and the request that we want to send is formatted like this, XWW format URL encoded. This is according to Twilio specifications in their documentation. And there's two fields that we want to send. One is from, so that's going to be the phone number of the person who sent us a message. So we'll just make up something. It really doesn't matter. And we need to send the message body. Okay, my application's running, so I'm just going to try it out. And there we go. So we can see that it sent my hello from Postman message to the controller just fine. The controller sent it on to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT replied with its standard-ish reply. Great. If it didn't work, I would put a breakpoint in the method and try again and see if the request is being mapped at all. If it isn't even hitting the breakpoint, then I know something is wrong with either my test request, perhaps the wrong type of method or form encoding is wrong, or there's a mistake, capitalization or spelling. It can take a bit of trial and error to resolve issues like that without seeing how the ASP.NET middleware is actually handling your request. So now I see it working, I feel more confident to try it with Twilio. But I know I will need to give Twilio a public URL, but without deploying my code, I don't have one. The easiest way to get a public URL is to use a tunneler like Conveyor. There's a version of Conveyor for the command line which you can get from conveyor.cloud website, but in this video I will set up the VS extension. In Visual Studio, I go to Extensions, Manage Extensions, and in the Online tab, I can search for Conveyor. Download and close Visual Studio in order to install it. Now I've followed the installation process and restarted Visual Studio. When I run the application now, I can find the Conveyor window. For me, it's down here, and I can see it's giving me the local URL, a remote URL, which is good for LAN connections, and we want the internet URL, which we can get by clicking Access over Internet. The first time you click Access over Internet, you'll see a request to log in and also a register button. You can click the register button to go to the website and sign up for free. Once connected, Conveyor will set up a tunnel, and I can see here the internet URL. This is the free level of service, which gives you a URL that changes every time you connect to tunneling and only works for 4-hour stints. After that, you have to restart VS and get a new URL. Paid plans are pretty cheap and more convenient. So now I have the public URL, I can go to the Twilio website and log in. They do have a great onboarding experience, which I have already done and received an SMS number. Hopefully you can do that easily enough. Then to configure a message webhook, I go to Phone Numbers, Manage, Active Numbers, and I click the number I want to work with. There's the warning I was talking about earlier for the 911. I'm just going to ignore that, go down to Messaging Configurations, and then here's what URL will be called when an SMS comes in. So you can see here, this was the last time I was running it, so I'm going to update the URL to the new public URL and save it. And remember that with the free Conveyor plan, the URL is subject to change, so keep an eye on that. And now the moment of truth. I will send an SMS. And it worked. If it didn't, I could put a breakpoint in my method and check if the request came in properly. If it didn't, there is a message log in Twilio that can help. There is one issue that may not have been obvious, and that is that this code treats every incoming message, regardless of the sending phone, as part of the same conversation, because it only has one instance of chatbot session. It's pretty easy to go back to the controller and change this line here to get or create chatbot session, and we'll pass in the number of the caller. And we're going to return a chatbot session. And what I need is a field to store my sessions in. So let's make it a dictionary of strings for the from number and chatbot sessions for the corresponding session. Now, if there isn't already a session for the from number, we create one. And then we return. So it will either return an existing one or create a new one. So now at least you can have separate chats for separate users. To take it to production, of course, you would need better error handling, logging, session timeout, validation to prevent abuse, etc. Well, I hope you found this video helpful, and feel free to like and subscribe, of course, and thank you for watching. Bye for now.